It doesn't start with confidence. It starts with questioning everything. The way you see people, the patterns you notice, the conclusions you reach. They feel accurate, but they don't match what others say. So instead of trusting it, you second guess it. And over time, that gap between what you perceive and what's validated creates doubt. What most people miss is that this doubt isn't weakness, it's uncalibrated perception. INFJs process deeply, connect patterns early, and sense direction before it's obvious. But early on, that clarity has no external confirmation. So instead of becoming confidence, it becomes hesitation. Not because it's wrong, but because it's ahead. In this video, we're breaking down why INFJs doubt themselves early, and how that same process turns into unshakable inner clarity over time. The transition from second guessing to certainty, the patterns that build internal trust, and the exact moment perception stops needing validation. If you've ever felt like you see clearly but still question yourself, stay until the end. And subscribe Brainy Quiet Mind for more insights into how clarity is built from within. They notice patterns others don't but can't prove them yet. Patterns seen, evidence missing, certainty unstable. There is a moment when something becomes clear, but only to you. The way someone reacts, the direction a situation is moving, the subtle connection between events. It all aligns internally. You see it forming before it becomes obvious. But when you try to explain it, there's nothing concrete to point to. This creates tension, not because the pattern is unclear, but because it exists without proof. You can feel the direction, but you can't demonstrate it. Others rely on what is visible, what can be explained step by step, what can be confirmed in the moment. And what you see doesn't fit that structure yet. It exists ahead of it. From the outside, this can look uncertain. Your explanation may sound incomplete. Your reasoning may feel difficult to follow, not because it lacks logic, but because the full structure hasn't unfolded yet. You're describing something that is still forming, something that hasn't fully revealed itself. What makes this powerful is timing. The INFJ often recognizes patterns before they become obvious to others, but early recognition comes without validation. And without validation, certainty feels unstable, even when the perception is accurate. Over time, this leads to self-questioning. Not because the perception is wrong, but because it cannot be confirmed immediately. You begin to wonder whether what you see is real or just an interpretation. And that doubt doesn't come from weakness. It comes from lack of proof. This is where the early stage of self-doubt forms. You are seeing something real, but you don't yet have the structure to support it externally. And without that structure, trusting it feels uncertain. Because for the INFJ, clarity often appears before evidence. And when you notice patterns others don't but can't prove them yet, it doesn't just create insight. It creates the exact conditions where doubt and accuracy exist at the same time. They rely on external validation because their perception feels uncertain, perception unclear, validation sought, certainty deferred. There is a moment when what you see feels real, but not stable enough to stand on its own. The pattern is there, the connection makes sense, the direction feels accurate, yet something holds you back. Not lack of insight, but lack of confirmation. And in that gap, you look outward. This reliance doesn't come from weakness, it comes from calibration. Early on, your perception hasn't been tested enough to trust fully. So when others respond differently, when their reactions don't match what you see, it creates friction. You start to question whether your interpretation is correct or if something is being missed. From the outside, this can look like hesitation, asking for opinions, checking reactions, adjusting your view based on feedback. You're not abandoning your perception, you're trying to stabilize it. Because when something is internally clear but externally unsupported, it feels incomplete. What makes this powerful is contrast. Your perception operates ahead of visible evidence, while validation depends on what is already obvious. That difference creates a delay. You see something early, but you can't confirm it until it unfolds. And until it does, certainty feels temporary. Over time, this leads to dependency. Not absolute, but consistent enough to shape how you respond. You begin to weigh external reactions more heavily, even when your internal understanding remains present. Because external agreement feels like proof. This is where early doubt deepens. Not because your perception is unreliable, but because it isn't yet reinforced by repeated confirmation. You're seeing clearly, but without enough evidence to trust it fully, because for the INFJ, perception developed before validation. And when you rely on external confirmation to stabilize what you already see, it doesn't mean your insight is weak. It means your trust in it is still being built through experience. they get dismissed or misunderstood when they express insight shared, meaning reduced, response misaligned. There is a moment when you finally say what you've been seeing, and it doesn't land. The idea feels complete internally, structured, connected, precise. But once it leaves you, it gets simplified, redirected, or overlooked. The response you receive doesn't match what you meant, and in that gap, something shifts. This isn't about complexity for its own sake. It's about timing and translation. You're expressing a pattern that hasn't fully revealed itself yet, using language that has to compress multiple layers into a few sentences. Others hear the surface of it, a statement, a claim, an observation, but not the structure behind it. And because that structure isn't visible to them yet, the insight feels premature. From the outside, the reaction can look reasonable. Questions that narrow the point, responses that reinterpret it, or dismissals that frame it as overthinking. Nothing appears intentionally dismissive, but internally you recognize the mismatch. They're responding to a different version of what you said. What makes this powerful is repetition. It doesn't happen once. It happens across different situations, different people, different attempts to explain what you see. Each time, the same pattern appears: partial understanding, simplified feedback, missed layers. And over time, that pattern becomes predictable. This is where doubt strengthens. Not because your perception changes, but because its reception does. You begin to question whether the problem is the insight itself or the way it's being expressed. And that question leads to hesitation. Over time, this shapes your behavior. You become more selective with when you speak, how much you explain, how you structure your thoughts. Not to hide them, but to increase the chance they are understood. Because the gap between what you see and what others hear becomes something you start managing. Because for the INFJ, the challenge is not seeing clearly. It is being understood when clarity arrives early. And when insights are dismissed or misunderstood repeatedly, it doesn't erase the insight. It creates the conditions where you begin to question your own certainty before it has the chance to be confirmed. They begin questioning their own judgment, repeatedly judgment and challenged, certainty unstable, doubt cycles. There is a moment when what you see no longer feels solid, not because it changed, but because it keeps getting questioned. Each time your insight meets a different reaction, each time your understanding is not confirmed, something starts to shift internally. The pattern is still there, but your trust in it begins to weaken. This questioning doesn't come from nowhere. It builds through contrast. You see something clearly, but others don't respond the same way. You anticipate a direction, but it hasn't unfolded yet. You express an insight, and it gets simplified or dismissed. Each moment alone is manageable, but repeated, they create instability. From the outside, it can look like overthinking. Revisiting the same idea, reanalyzing what was already understood, adjusting interpretations again and again. But internally, it is not confusion. It is calibration. You are trying to align your perception with reality without enough confirmation to stabilize it. What makes this powerful is repetition. Doubt doesn't appear once, it loops. Each time you question your judgment, it becomes easier to question it again. Not because it's wrong, but because it hasn't been reinforced enough to resist doubt. Over time, this creates a pattern of hesitation. Even when something feels clear, you pause. Even when your interpretation makes sense, you reevaluate it. Because the experience has taught you that clarity does not always lead to confirmation. This is where early self-doubt becomes deeply rooted. Not because your perception is unreliable, but because it is ahead of validation. You are seeing patterns before they are visible, but without evidence to support them immediately. Trusting them feels uncertain, because for the INFJ, judgment develops before proof. And when you begin questioning your own judgment repeatedly, it doesn't mean your insight is weak. It means your trust in it is still being shaped by a lack of consistent external confirmation. They start observing instead of reacting impulsively. Reaction slows, observation rises, processing deepens. There is a moment when the immediate response stops, and something else takes its place. Instead of reacting as soon as something happens, you pause. Not out of hesitation, but out of awareness that reacting too quickly has led to uncertainty before. This shift is subtle. The situation still unfolds the same way, but your role in it changes. You no longer move with the first interpretation that appears. You hold it, examine it, compare it with what you've seen before. And in that space, your understanding becomes more structured. From the outside, it can look like restraint. Fewer immediate reactions, less visible emotion, more measured responses. But internally, it is not suppression. It is redirection. You are moving from reacting to processing, from responding instantly to understanding first. What makes this powerful is that observation reduces error. When reactions are immediate, they rely on incomplete information. But when you observe first, you allow patterns to reveal themselves before acting on them. And that creates clarity that wasn't available before. Over time, this changes how you interact with everything. You begin to see more before you respond, understand more before you decide, connect more before you conclude. The process becomes slower on the surface, but more accurate beneath it. This is where the shift from doubt to clarity begins to stabilize. You are no longer reacting to uncertainty, you are observing until it becomes structured. And that structure reduces the need to question yourself. Because for the INFJ, clarity is not found in immediate reaction, it is found in patient observation. And when they start observing instead of reacting impulsively, they don't just become calmer. They become precise in a way that builds trust in their own perception over time. They test their perception against real outcomes over time, perception applied. Outcome observed, accuracy measured. There is a moment when what you see is no longer kept internal, it gets tested. Not loudly, not as a declaration, but through quiet comparison. You notice something, you hold it, and instead of acting immediately, you wait. You watch how the situation unfolds, and whether it moves in the direction you sensed. This testing is patient. It doesn't rely on one result. It builds through repetition. You recognize a pattern, you anticipate an outcome, and then you observe what actually happens. Sometimes it aligns, sometimes it doesn't. But each result adds information, not just about the situation, but about the accuracy of your perception itself. From the outside, nothing appears different. You're still observing, still engaging, still responding normally. But internally, there is a constant comparison happening. What you thought would happen versus what actually did. And over time, that comparison becomes structured. What makes this powerful is feedback. Perception without testing remains uncertain, but perception matched against reality becomes measurable. You begin to see where you were accurate, where you were early, where you misread something. And each correction refines the next interpretation. Over time, this creates a stable system. You're no longer guessing, you're calibrating, adjusting your understanding based on real outcomes instead of assumptions. And that process strengthens trust, not instantly, but consistently. This is where doubt begins to lose its control. Not because you decide to stop questioning yourself, but because the results start answering those questions. Your perception is no longer isolated, it is being verified through experience. Because for the INFJ, clarity is not built on belief, it is built on alignment between perception and reality. And when they test what they see against what actually happens over time, they don't just become more confident, they become accurate in a way that no longer depends on guessing or external confirmation. They recognize when their insights consistently prove accurate, accuracy repeats, patterns confirm, trust forms. There is a moment when doubt starts losing its grip. Not because you forced confidence, but because reality keeps aligning with what you saw earlier. The situation unfolds, the behavior follows the same direction, the outcome matches what you sensed before it happened. And this doesn't occur once, it repeats. This recognition is quiet but decisive. You don't announce it, don't turn it into a statement. You simply notice the consistency, the same type of insight, in different contexts, leading to outcomes that confirm it. What once felt like a possibility begins to feel reliable. Not perfect, not absolute, but stable enough to trust. From the outside, nothing dramatic changes. You still observe, still process, still engage in the same way. But internally, the comparison between perception and reality becomes clear. You are no longer waiting to see if you might be right. You are beginning to expect alignment. What makes this powerful is repetition across variation. It's not the same exact situation proving you right. It's different situations following the same underlying structure. That structure is what confirms the accuracy, not the surface details. Over time, this builds internal evidence. You no longer rely on external agreement to validate what you see. The outcomes themselves become the validation. And that changes how you relate to your own perception. This is where self-trust begins to stabilize, not as a sudden shift, but as a gradual accumulation of proof. Each confirmed insight reduces the need to question the next one. And that reduction changes how you engage with uncertainty. Because for the INFJ, confidence is not built on belief alone. It is built on consistency between what is seen and what actually happens. And when insights repeatedly prove accurate over time, they don't just increase confidence. They establish a level of internal clarity that no longer depends on external validation to exist. They reduce dependence on others' opinions, external noise lowers, internal signal strengthens, dependence fades. There is a moment when other people's opinions stop carrying the same weight, not because they become irrelevant, but because they are no longer required to confirm what you already understand. The need to check, compare, and adjust begins to loosen. This shift is not immediate, it forms through repeated proof. You've seen your perception align with reality enough times that external agreement no longer feels necessary. Opinions are still heard, still considered, but they are evaluated, not adopted automatically. And that difference changes everything. From the outside, this can look like independence. Fewer questions, fewer checks, fewer adjustments based on what others think. But internally, it is not about rejecting input. It is about no longer needing it to stabilize your own understanding. What makes this powerful is that perception becomes self-supported. When your clarity is built through experience, it doesn't collapse when others disagree. It remains stable because it has already been tested against reality, not just opinion. Over time, this creates a different way of engaging with people. You listen without absorbing everything. You consider perspectives without losing your own. And that balance allows you to stay open without becoming uncertain. This is where the transition from doubt to clarity becomes visible. The INFJ is no longer adjusting their perception to match external reactions. They are allowing external input to exist alongside their own understanding without replacing it. Because for the INFJ, clarity is not about isolating from others. It is about standing on something that has already been proven internally. And when dependence on others' opinions reduces, it doesn't create distance. It creates stability in a way that allows their perception to remain consistent regardless of external influence. They trust their internal signals even without confirmation signal detected. Trust applied, action aligned. There is a moment when you feel something, and you don't wait for proof. Not because evidence doesn't matter, but because you've seen this pattern before. The same internal signal, the same quiet clarity, the same direction forming before anything visible confirms it. And instead of questioning it, you follow it. This trust is not blind, it is built. Every time your perception aligned with reality, every time your insight proved accurate before others saw it, something strengthened internally. You are not reacting to a feeling alone, you are responding to a signal that has already been tested through experience. From the outside, this can look intuitive, like you're making decisions without full information. But internally, the information is already there. Not in visible evidence, but in recognized patterns that have repeated enough to become reliable. What makes this powerful is that confirmation is no longer required for movement. You don't need to wait for things to unfold before adjusting your direction. You can act based on what you already understand, even when others don't yet see it. Over time, this creates speed and precision. While others wait for clarity to appear externally, you are already aligned with it internally. And that alignment allows you to move earlier, adjust faster, and respond more accurately. This is where unshakable clarity begins to form. Not because you stop questioning completely, but because questioning no longer stops action. You trust what you see enough to move with it, even when it hasn't been confirmed yet. Because for the INFJ, internal signals are not random impressions. They are the result of patterns understood deeply enough to be recognized instantly. And when that recognition becomes strong enough to trust without confirmation, clarity stops being dependent on proof and starts guiding action before proof appears. They develop unshakable clarity because it's been proven repeatedly, clarity built, proof accumulated, doubt dissolves. There is a moment when everything stops feeling uncertain, not because you decided to be confident, but because there is nothing left to question. The same perception, across different situations, has led to the same accurate understanding. And when that happens enough times, it stops feeling like possibility, it becomes structure. This clarity is not sudden, it forms layer by layer. Each time your insight aligned with reality, each time your internal signal matched the outcome, something was reinforced. Not emotionally, but logically. The connection between what you see and what actually happens becomes consistent enough that it no longer needs to be tested in the same way. From the outside, this looks stable. Decisions feel grounded, responses feel precise, hesitation disappears. But internally, it is not about confidence as a feeling. It is about certainty as a result. You are no longer relying on belief, you are relying on a pattern that has been confirmed repeatedly. What makes this powerful is that repetition removes doubt at its root. Doubt exists when outcomes are unclear, when perception hasn't been tested enough to trust fully. But when the same kind of insight continues to prove accurate across time, doubt has nothing to attach itself to. Over time, this creates a form of clarity that is difficult to disrupt, not because it cannot be challenged, but because it is grounded in experience. New situations are interpreted through a system that has already been validated, not through uncertainty. This is where the transformation completes. The same person who once questioned everything now moves with precision. Not faster, not louder, but with a level of internal stability that doesn't depend on external confirmation. Because for the INFJ, clarity is not something they decide to have, it is something they build. And when that clarity has been proven repeatedly through real outcomes, it doesn't just feel strong, it becomes unshakable in a way that no longer depends on doubt to define it. It was never a lack of clarity, it was a lack of proof. Early on, you questioned yourself not because you were wrong, but because your perception arrived before confirmation. And once that perception gets tested, refined, and proven over time, doubt doesn't fight back. It disappears. If this made you rethink how you see yourself, don't just agree with it, track it. Where were you right but doubted it? Where did reality confirm what you already sensed? Drop it in the comments. And if you want to turn that awareness into something you can actually rely on, subscribe to Brainy Quiet Mind, where clarity stops being questioned and starts being trusted.